My son stood on the velvet stage, holding a cardboard box marked $5 for my useless mom. The wealthy crowd laughed as I froze in my threadbare coat, invisible to them. He thought he was destroying the poor widow who raised him, but he did not know the truth. I was not helpless. I was the silent owner of his massive debt. Tonight, his laughter would die when I bought his entire life for $5 million. My name is Meredith Harlow. I am 58 years old, a widow who has spent the last 20 years making herself small so that others could feel big. I live in a quiet, drafty apartment in a small town in Colorado, where the mountains cast long shadows over my modest life. I learned a long time ago that money is loud, but true power is a whisper. Tonight, however, the noise was deafening. I stood in the back of the crystal ballroom, clutching my worn handbag with both hands to stop them from trembling. My son, Evan Harlow, 35 years old and glowing with the arrogance of new money, held the microphone at the center of the stage. This was his night. It was a fundraising gala for the elite of Denver, a room filled with people who measured worth in stock options and summer homes. I had come only because he begged me to, claiming he wanted family present for his big moment. I should have known better. "Ladies and gentlemen," Evan announced, his voice smooth like oiled silk. "We talk about charity tonight. We talk about helping the less fortunate. And speaking of charity, I want to introduce you to my personal charity case." The spotlight swung through the darkness. It hit me like a physical blow. I blinked against the blinding glare, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. I wore my best coat, but under these chandeliers, it looked threadbare and pathetic. Evan reached behind the podium and pulled out a cardboard box. It was crude, taped together with silver duct tape, jarring against the silk tablecloths. He held it up for the room to see. Written in thick black marker were the words, $5 for my useless mom. She is here tonight, folks. Evan laughed, pointing a finger directly at me. Meredith Harlow, the woman who taught me exactly what not to be. Come on. Mum, don't look so sour. I'm trying to get you some grocery money so you stop calling me asking for handouts. The room erupted. Men in tuxedos chuckled, shaking their heads as if acknowledging a clever joke. Women with diamonds around their throats tittered behind manicured hands. I felt the heat rise up my neck. It was not just embarrassment. It was a physical violation. I had raised him alone. I had scrubbed floors to pay for his private tutors. I had worn the same shoes for 6 years so he could have the latest sneakers. And this was my repayment. Beside him, Kendra Morell, his new partner, covered her mouth to hide a smirk that did not quite reach her eyes. She wore a red dress that likely cost more than my rent for 3 years. She leaned into the microphone, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh, Evan, be nice. Maybe if we get enough fives, we can buy her a new coat. That one smells like mothballs." Kendra laughed, and the sound was sharp, like glass breaking. I looked at Evan, really looked at him. I was searching for a trace of the boy who used to cling to my leg when it thundered. I looked for the teenager I had nursed through the flu. There was nothing there, only a predator enjoying his kill. He was grinning, basking in the applause of strangers, selling his mother's dignity for a moment of amusement. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud break. It was quiet, like a heavy door closing in a deep vault. The hurt that had filled my eyes vanished. In its place, a cold, clinical assessment took over. The tears that threatened to spill evaporated instantly. I straightened my spine. I did not slouch. I did not look away. I held his gaze until he blinked, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. Is this all I am to you? Evan, I whispered, though no one heard me over the laughter. I turned and walked away. I did not run. The sound of my sensible heels on the marble floor was lost under the jeering. I walked past the champagne towers and the caviar stations. I walked past the security guards who looked at me with pity. Mom? Mom? Wait. Don't be such a drama queen, Evan called out, his voice booming over the speakers. She will be back. She always needs something. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the night. The air in Denver was biting. It cut through my thin coat. But I welcomed the freeze. It numbed the ache in my heart. I stood on the curb, waiting for the bus, while the golden light of the hotel spilled out onto the pavement behind me. Evan thought he had won. He thought he had put me in my place. He thought I was just a poor, old woman who would go home and weep into her pillow. He had forgotten who I was before I decided to play the role of the struggling widow. He had forgotten that genes do not lie. I looked up at the penthouse suite where the party raged on. A dangerous calm settled over me. Filial piety was dead. I had buried it in that ballroom. You want $5? Evan? I said to the empty street, my voice steady and hard. I will give you a lesson that costs a lot more than that. The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes. I climbed aboard, leaving the luxury behind. But my mind was already calculating. Why did they think a mother who had sacrificed everything for 35 years would simply roll over and die? They were about to find out that the woman they mocked was not a lamb. She was a sleeping lioness, and they had just stepped on her tail. As the bus rattled through the dark streets of Denver, carrying me back to the side of town where the streetlights flickered and died, I stared at my reflection in the grimy window. The woman staring back looked tired. She looked defeated. It was a perfect disguise. It was the costume I had worn for 20 years, ever since the day my husband, Richard, was lowered into the ground. The world remembered Richard as the titan of industry, the face of Greylight Holdings. They built statues of him. They named libraries after him. But they forgot, or perhaps they never knew, who built the engine that powered that empire 20 years ago. I was not just a wife. I was the co-founder. I was the one who stayed up until 4 a.m, analyzing market trends while Richard slept. I was the one who predicted the tech bubble when everyone else was buying blind. When he died, I made a choice. I stepped back into the shadows. I let his legend grow while I became simply the widow. I did it for Evan. I wanted my son to have a mother, not a board member. But more than that, I wanted to see who Evan would become without the crutch of unlimited wealth. It was a test I had been running for 2 decades, and tonight, the results were finally devastatingly clear. Evan had failed. He grew up surrounded by silk and velvet, but he had a hollow center. He lacked the grit that Richard and I had forged in our early years of poverty. To teach him value, I pretended my resources were dwindling. I moved into a smaller apartment. I clipped coupons. I told him we had to be careful. I wanted him to step up, to learn to build something of his own. Instead, he learned to despise me for not giving him more. I closed my eyes and remembered the time he was 22. He had racked up $50,000 in gambling debts in Las Vegas. He called me, weeping, terrified that bad men, were going to break his legs. I told him I had no money to give. I let him sweat for 3 days. Then, I secretly instructed my private attorney to pay the debt off through an anonymous shell company. Evan thought it was a clerical error at the casino. He thought he was a genius who had outsmarted the house. He never knew it was his useless mother who saved his life. Then came Kendra. I remembered the first time I met her. She looked at my scuffed shoes, and then at Evan's platinum credit card. And I saw the calculation in her eyes. She was not a partner. She was a parasite. Evan. Honey. Kendra had said during a dinner 3 months ago, swirling her wine while I sat in silence. You really need to cut the dead weight. Your mother. She is just dragging down your brand. Successful men do not have mothers who shop at thrift stores. I had waited for Evan to defend me. I had waited for him to say that I was the one who sat by his bedside when he had pneumonia, the one who cheered loudest at his graduation. You are right, babe, Evan had replied, not even looking at me. She is embarrassing. I took that insult. I swallowed it like bitter medicine because I kept telling myself that a mother's love is endurance. I thought if I just loved him enough, if I stayed humble enough, he would eventually see the truth. I thought the kindness would break through the greed. But tonight, standing under those blinding lights with that cardboard box, something inside me finally died. It wasn't my pride. It was my hope. When he laughed at me, when he asked strangers for $5 to support the woman who had secretly handed him the world, I realized the terrifying truth. Evan did not see me as a person. He did not even see me as a mother anymore. To him, I was just an obstacle. I was a stain on his perfectly polished life that needed to be scrubbed away. The bus hissed to a halt at my stop. I stepped off onto the cracked pavement. The cold wind bit at my face, but I did not pull my coat tighter. I needed the cold. I needed to freeze the part of my heart that still wanted to bake him cookies and forgive him. I am done, I whispered to the empty street. I was done waiting for the boy I raised to return. He was gone. In his place was a stranger who valued money above blood. Well, if money was the only language Evan understood, then I was about to become the most fluent speaker he had ever met. I would not beg for his love again. I would not ask for his respect. I was going to buy it, break it, and then decide if I wanted to keep it. The test was over. The lesson was about to begin. I pushed open the door to my apartment, the rusty hinges groaning in protest. The air inside was stale, smelling of old tea and accumulated dust, a stark contrast to the lavender-scented air conditioning of the hotel ballroom I had just fled. I did not take off my coat. I walked straight to the bedroom closet, pushed aside the stack of worn-out linens that I used to keep up the appearance of poverty, and pulled away the loose floorboard in the corner. Beneath it sat a heavy steel safe, cold to the touch. I spun the dial left to right to left. The combination was the date Richard asked me to marry him. With a heavy click, the door swung open. Inside, there were no jewels or stacks of cash. There was only a thick leather binder. I opened it, my fingers tracing the embossed seal of Greylight Holdings. These documents proved that I was not merely a helpless widow living on a fixed income. I was the majority shareholder, hidden behind a blind trust, possessing enough voting power to fire the entire board of directors before breakfast, if I chose to. For 2 decades. I had let this power sleep. Tonight, I was waking it up. A sharp knock at the door broke the silence. I did not flinch. I knew who it was. I opened the door to reveal Luther Kane. At 50 years old, Luther was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite and dressed in Italian wool. He had been my husband's protege and my secret financial advisor for 15 years. He stepped into the shabby hallway, his polished shoes looking absurd against the linoleum. "I saw the live stream," Luther said, his voice low and dangerous. He did not offer pity. He knew I hated it. I walked to the kitchen table and sat down, my legs finally giving out. He put a box on the stage. Luther, a cardboard box. He asked them for $5, like I was a stray dog. Luther set his briefcase on the table and clicked it open. It was not just cruelty, Meredith. It was strategy. I looked up, wiping a stray tear from my cheek. Strategy. Humiliating his mother is a business move. "Evan and Kendra are drowning," Luther said, sliding a dossier across the table. "I have been digging into their financials as you asked. It is worse than we thought. They are in debt. Massive debt. $3 million to legitimate banks, and another $2 million to private lenders who do not use lawyers to collect." I opened the file. The numbers were staggering. Credit cards maxed out. Loans taken against assets that did not exist. The gala tonight was a desperate attempt to show potential investors that he is in control. Luther explained, tapping a photo of Evan smiling with Kendra. "But the humiliation of you, that had a specific purpose. He is preparing to file a motion with the Greylight Board. He wants to claim you are senile. He wants to prove you are a financial liability and mentally unfit so he can petition the court to take control of your trust fund." That box. It was his exhibit, I felt a cold chill settle in my stomach. It was one thing to be ungrateful. It was another to methodically destroy your mother's sanity for a paycheck. "He thinks I am weak," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "He thinks I am just an old woman waiting to die." "He thinks you are the past," Luther said. He looked me in the eye. "But you own the company he is trying to impress. You own the debt he is trying to hide. You can stop this. Meredith, you can reveal yourself and cut him off." I closed the dossier. The image of Evan laughing on that stage burned in my mind. If I simply cut him off, he would hate me, but he would not learn. He would blame me for his failure. I needed him to understand the weight of the world he was trying to buy. "No," I said, the tremor leaving my voice. "If I reveal myself now, I am just a mother scolding a child. I need to be something else. I want to buy his debt." Luther paused, his eyebrows raising slightly. "All of it. Every cent," I said, leaning forward. "I want you to set up 3 layers of shell companies, make them sound aggressive, make them sound faceless. Go to his lenders, specifically the private ones. Buy the notes. I want to own the roof over his head, the car he drives, and the suit he wears. I want to hold the leash." Luther pulled out a fresh legal pad and a gold pen. A faint smile touched his lips. "Iron Ridge Finance holds the bulk of the high-risk loans. They will sell for 60 cents on the dollar if we offer cash tomorrow morning. Do it?" I commanded. "And Luther, do not let him know it is me. Not yet. Let him think the wolves are at the door. I want to see if my son has any fight left in him, or if he is just a hollow shell." "It will be done by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning," Luther said, writing quickly. I looked out the window at the dark outline of the city. The tears were gone. The heartbreak was packed away in the safe with the rest of the past. The woman who begged for affection was gone. In her place sat the majority shareholder of Greylight Holdings, and she was preparing a hostile takeover of her own son's life. He wanted $5, I said softly to the empty room. He is going to wish he had just given me a hug. Luther sat across from me at the scarred kitchen table, the only piece of furniture I had refused to sell when I downsized. The overhead light buzzed, casting long, harsh shadows on the stack of documents between us. The silence in the room was heavy, filled with the ghosts of the son I thought I knew, and the monster the paperwork was revealing him to be. Luther pushed a thick file toward me with 2 fingers. His face was grim, the expression of a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. "You need to see the breakdown, Meredith," Luther said softly. "It is not just bad luck. It is negligence." I opened the folder. The first page was a balance sheet, Bleeding's red ink. My eyes widened as I traced the lines. $600,000, I asked, my voice trembling. He lost. $600,000 in 6 months. A venture capital investment, Luther explained, his tone dry. A chain of virtual restaurants, ghost kitchens that exist only on delivery apps. It was Kendra's idea. She convinced him it was the future of dining. The company folded last week. The money is gone. I felt a wave of nausea. $600,000. That was enough to fund the local library for a decade. And Evan had set it on fire because a woman with a nice smile told him to. "There is more," Luther said, flipping the page. "Kendra Morell. Her personal finances." I looked at the credit card statements. They were a testament to vanity, designer handbags, first-class trips to Milan, spa treatments that cost more than my monthly rent, $120,000 in credit card debt. I read aloud, the number tasting like ash in my mouth. She is spending money she does not have to impress people she does not like. They are leveraging everything to keep up the appearance of being billionaires, Luther said. But banks stopped lending to them 3 months ago, so they went elsewhere. He pointed to a loan agreement near the bottom of the stack. The lender's name was Iron Ridge Finance. I knew that name. In the darker corners of the financial world, Iron Ridge was not a bank. They were sharks who lent money at predatory rates and collected with baseball bats if the payments were late. They borrowed $500,000 from Iron Ridge, Luther said. The interest rate is 40%, compounding weekly. Evan put up the penthouse as collateral. "The penthouse is already mortgaged," I said, looking up sharply. "Richard bought that place outright." "Evan took out a mortgage, 2 mortgages," Luther corrected. "He is underwater, Meredith. If he misses a payment to Iron Ridge, they will not just take the apartment. They will hurt him." I leaned back, closing my eyes. My son was a fool. He was reckless and vain. But the next document Luther handed me shattered whatever sympathy I had left. It was a draft of a property transfer deed. Read the clause at the bottom. Luther instructed. I put on my reading glasses. The legal jargon was dense, but the intent was clear. Evan was preparing to transfer the deed of the penthouse solely to Kendra Morell, but the condition for the transfer made my blood run cold. The transfer was to execute immediately upon the event of my distinct legal incapacitation or disappearance. He was planning to commit me, I whispered, my hand shaking so violently the paper rattled. He wanted to prove I was senile so he could take power of attorney and give my husband's home to her. Luther nodded slowly. And look at this. We found traces of digital correspondence with a questionable notary. Evan was inquiring about the legality of altering the dates on your husband's original will. He wanted to make it look like Richard left the voting shares directly to him, bypassing you entirely. It is fraud, Meredith. It is a felony. I stared at the wall. For years, I told myself Evan was just misguided. I told myself he was young and influenced by the wrong crowd. But you do not accidentally try to forge a will. You do not accidentally plan to declare your mother insane so you can give her home to a mistress. This was not a mistake. This was malice. He sees me as a blockage, I said, my voice hardening into steel. I am not his mother. I am just a vault door he cannot figure out how to crack. The payments to Iron Ridge are due in 48 hours, Luther said, closing his briefcase. If he does not pay, they will start the foreclosure process on the penthouse, and they will come looking for him physically. Do you want me to intervene? We can pay Iron Ridge directly and restructure the debt before he even knows. I looked at the picture of Evan and Kendra on the front of the report. They looked so happy, so arrogant, so sure that the world owed them everything. No, I said. Luther paused. No, do not save him, I said, standing up and walking to the window. If I save him now, he will just find another way to cheat me later. He needs to feel the floor drop out from under him. He needs to know what it feels like when the safety net is gone. It will be brutal, Luther warned. He tried to erase me. Luther, I said, turning back to him. He stood on a stage and sold my dignity for $5. Now I'm going to let him see how much I'm really worth. I pointed at the file. Let Iron Ridge scare him. Let the banks call him. Let Kendra show her true colors when the credit cards stop working. I want to buy the debt. Yes. But do not tell him. Let him think he is alone in the dark. I want to see if my son calls his mother for help, or if he tries to bury her again. The cream-colored envelope arrived by courier 3 days later. It was heavy, textured, and smelled faintly of expensive cologne. Inside was an invitation to the Future Horizons launch, an event where Evan planned to sign a $1 million contract that he believed would save him from ruin. He had sent it to my apartment, likely assuming I would be too ashamed to show my face, but wanting to flaunt his resilience anyway. Luther stood by the window, watching the rain streak the glass. He turned to me, his jaw set tight. We should go there tonight and end this, Luther said, his voice flat. We have the evidence of the fraud. We have the financial records. We can walk in and expose him before he signs anything. I ran my finger over the embossed lettering of Evan's name. No, I said softly. If we stop him now, he will blame the circumstances. He will say he was unlucky. I need him to believe he has won. I need him to stand at the top of the mountain, so he understands exactly how far the fall is. My resolve hardened when I saw the news feed on Luther's tablet. Kendra had been busy. To mitigate the PR disaster of Evan mocking his mother, she had released a statement to the local gossip columns. It is heartbreaking to watch Meredith's mental decline. The article quoted Kendra. Her dementia has made her aggressive and confused. The box on stage was just Evan's way of using humor to cope with a tragedy. We are looking into a care facility for her. I felt a cold fire ignite in my chest. They were not just stealing my money anymore. They were stealing my sanity. They were rewriting my history to suit their narrative. Get the car. Luther, I commanded, standing up and grabbing my coat. We are not going to the party yet. We are going to see Rose Marie. Rose Marie Hutchins was 80 years old and had been the family attorney since before Greylight Holdings made its first million. Her office smelled of mahogany and old paper. She sat behind her massive desk, looking at me with eyes that had seen too much human greed. I never thought we would have to use this. Meredith, Rose-Marie said, her voice raspy with age. She slid a document across the desk. Richard insisted on it. He always said that wealth without character is just a loaded gun. I looked at the document. It was the filial respect clause, a hidden stipulation in the family trust. It stated clearly that any beneficiary who engaged in the public humiliation, abuse, or gross negligence of the primary grantor would immediately forfeit all rights to the inheritance. "We need proof," Rose-Marie said, though she already knew the answer. "The court requires undeniable evidence that the conduct was malicious and public." I pulled out my phone. The video of the gala had gone viral. It had 2 million views. I pressed play, and Evan's voice filled the quiet office. $5 for my useless mom. The laughter of the crowd echoed like a nightmare. Is this enough?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. Rose-Marie watched the video, her expression grim. She took off her glasses and wiped them slowly. "It is more than enough," she whispered. "It is cruelty in its purest form. If you sign this, Meredith, he loses everything. The trust fund, the future dividends, the safety net. He will be on his own." I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the paper. I thought of the little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the garden. Then I thought of the man who planned to lock me in a facility and give my home to his mistress. The boy was gone. The man needed to be stopped. "He made his choice," I said, my voice steadying. "Now. I am making mine." I signed my name. The ink looked black and final against the white paper. With that signature, Evan Harlow went from being the heir to a fortune to being penniless, though he did not know it yet. As we walked back to the car, Luther's phone buzzed. He answered it, listened for a moment, and then hung up. He looked at me, a rare flash of satisfaction in his eyes. "It is done," Luther said. "Iron Ridge Finance accepted the wire transfer. We have purchased the entirety of Evan's debt, the high-interest loans, the collateral on the penthouse, the personal guarantees. You own it all. Meredith." I nodded, staring out at the city skyline. Somewhere in one of those glittering towers, my son was putting on his tuxedo, thinking he was about to conquer the world. He had no idea that the useless mother he had mocked was now the only thing standing between him and total destruction. "Good," I said, buttoning my coat against the wind. "Let him have his party. Let him drink his champagne. Tomorrow. The bill comes due." The notification landed in Evan's inbox at 8 in the morning. I sat in my small kitchen, drinking black coffee, while Luther projected the digital intercept onto his tablet. It was a formal notice stating that his debt to Iron Ridge Finance had been sold to a holding company called Phoenix Ledger LLC. It was one of the shell companies Luther had created for me the night before. I watched the surveillance feed from the camera Luther had legally installed in the hallway outside Evan's penthouse. My son looked at his phone, frowned, and then shrugged. "It is just a rebranding," Evan muttered to the empty air, tossing the phone onto the sofa. "Iron Ridge probably got bought out. Nothing changes." He was wrong. Everything had changed. Iron Ridge was a shark, but Phoenix Ledger was an executioner, and the executioner was his mother. The atmosphere in the penthouse shifted an hour later when Kendra stormed in. She was pacing back and forth, her heels clicking aggressively against the marble floors. She held a stack of unpaid bills in her hand. Evan? The caterer for the launch party is threatening to pull out. Kendra snapped, throwing the papers at him. They want a 50% deposit up front. Cash. Do you have it? Evan rubbed his temples, looking pale. I am moving some funds around. Babe, it is just a liquidity issue. Once I sign the contract at the party, we will be swimming in cash again. We better be, Kendra hissed. I am not going to be humiliated in front of the press. Evan, if this party fails, I am not sticking around to clean up the mess. The threat hung in the air. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear in Evan's eyes. He was realizing that her affection had a price tag, and he was currently overdrawn. By noon, the psychological warfare began. Luther sent the first automated demand letter from Phoenix Ledger. It was not a polite request. It was a demand for immediate payment of $300,000 in accrued interest, citing a breach of contract clause. Evan read it, his hands shaking. 300,000, Evan whispered, his voice cracking. That is impossible. They gave me 6 months. He tried to call his contact at Iron Ridge, but the number was disconnected. Panic began to set in. He paced the living room, sweat beading on his forehead. Then the lights flickered. The smart home system that controlled the penthouse's climate and lighting shut down. The concierge called the intercom. Mr. Harlow, the voice on the speaker said, cool and professional. We have been instructed to suspend building privileges due to 6 months of unpaid association fees. The elevators will no longer respond to your keycard. Evan slammed his hand against the wall. You cannot do this. I am Evan Harlow. Do you know who my father was? The line went dead. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. The screen lit up with the word, son. I stared at it. My heart gave a painful squeeze. Part of me wanted to answer. Part of me wanted to tell him it would be okay, to wire him the money, to fix it like I always did. But I remembered the box on the stage. $5 for my useless mom. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. He needs to break. Meredith, Luther said softly from across the table. If you answer, the lesson ends. I know, I said, turning the phone over. But I do not want him to do something stupid. He is unstable. Hire a private security detail. Luther. Have them watch him from a distance. If he looks like he is going to hurt himself, they intervene. Otherwise, they stay invisible. Luther nodded and made the call. On the screen, Evan was spiraling. He was drinking whiskey straight from the bottle. Kendra was in the corner, but she was not comforting him. She was on her phone, whispering. Luther adjusted the audio gain so we could hear her. Yes. Mark, Kendra whispered, shielding her mouth with her hand. He is losing it. The money is gone. If you want to pitch your proposal to the investors, do it at the party tonight. Evan will be a wreck. It is the perfect time to steal the spotlight. I watched Evan's face. He had stopped drinking. He was looking at her reflection in the window. He had heard her. You. Evan started, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and heartbreak. You are calling Mark Sterling. My competitor Kendra froze. She turned around, dropping the loving girlfriend act instantly. Her face was cold. Someone has to be the adult here. Evan, she said, shrugging. You are sinking. I am just grabbing a life raft. Evan slumped onto the sofa, looking small and defeated. The luxury apartment, the expensive suit, the beautiful girlfriend, it was all a facade. and the paint was peeling off. He looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. He was alone. I watched him bury his face in his hands. I did not feel the rush of victory I expected. I did not feel happy that my son was suffering. I felt a deep, crushing sorrow. I had failed to raise a man. I had raised a fool who had to lose everything to understand the value of anything. "Get ready." "Luther?" I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "The party starts in 2 hours. He is at rock bottom. It is time to go introduce ourselves to the new management." The ballroom was a sea of forced smiles and nervous energy. I stood just outside the heavy double doors, watching the live feed on Luther's tablet. Evan was circulating the room like a man on fire. His laughter too loud, his handshake too gripping. He was desperate. Kendra stuck close to him, her eyes scanning the room not for friends, but for exit routes. She knew the ship was sinking, even if Evan was still trying to bail out the water with a teaspoon. Then, the moment arrived. Julian Thorne, a man with silver hair and a suit that cost more than Evan's car, stepped out of the crowd. He was an associate of Luther's, a man known in the city for closing deals that no one else could touch. To Evan, he looked like a lifeline thrown from heaven. I watched Evan's face light up as Julian approached him near the podium. The microphone was still live, catching their conversation and broadcasting it to the hushed room. "Mr. Harlow," Julian said, his voice carrying a weight of authority. "I have been watching your presentation. It is ambitious. It is the future." "Mr. Thorne," Evan stammered, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for a champagne flute. We are poised for massive growth." "I agree," Julian said, pulling a thick document from his jacket pocket. "In fact, my firm is prepared to offer an immediate capital injection, $5 million, to cover your overhead and expand operations." The room gasped. I saw Kendra's head snap around, her eyes widening with greed. Evan looked like he might faint. He grabbed Julian's hand, shaking it violently. $5 million. Oh, thank God. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means. Where do I sign?" "There is just one condition," Julian said, pulling his hand back smoothly. "My partners require total transparency. We need to verify that your current assets are free of high-risk litigation or hostile liens. We use the standard commercial verification app. Run your primary liability check. Project it on the screen so my investors here can witness your solvency." It was a trap, simple and brutal. If Evan refused, he looked like he was hiding fraud. If he agreed, he exposed the truth. But Evan was blinded by the promise of $5 million. He thought he was safe. He thought Phoenix Ledger LLC was just a nameless corporation. "Of course I have nothing to hide," Evan announced, beaming at the crowd. "Kendra, connect my phone to the main screen. Let's show everyone how solid we are." Kendra hesitated, but the promise of money was too strong. She plugged the phone into the AV system. A massive projection of Evan's financial status appeared on the wall behind him. The app loaded, spinning a green circle, calculating liabilities key. Evan laughed, spreading his arms wide, clean as a whistle. Then the screen shifted. The logo for Phoenix Ledger LLC appeared as the primary creditor holding 100% of Evan's debt. And then the system expanded the details of the beneficial owner, as required by the new transparency laws Julian had referenced. The name did not say a bank. It did not say a hedge fund. In 10-foot-tall letters, the screen read, "Primary creditor, Meredith Harlow. The silence that fell over the room was instant and terrifying. The clinking of glasses stopped. The murmurs died. Evan froze, his back to the screen, still smiling until he saw the look on the faces in the front row. He turned around slowly. "What?" Evan whispered, the colour draining from his face until he looked like a corpse. "No. That is a glitch. That is a mistake." He turned to Julian for help, but Julian was already closing his folder. He offered Evan a cold, pitying smile. "There is no deal?" "Mr. Harlow," Julian said, loud enough for the press cameras to catch. "My client does not invest in children who play with fire." Julian turned and walked away. The trap was sprung. The cameras flashed blindly, capturing the moment of Evan's total exposure. Kendra stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She looked from the name on the screen to Evan, realizing that the useless woman she had mocked held the leash to their entire existence. "Mom." Evan wheezed into the microphone, his voice small and broken. I signaled the security guard. He pushed the double doors open. I did not walk in with a limp. I did not hunch my shoulders. I walked into that ballroom with the stride of a woman who had built empires while these people were still learning to tie their shoes. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I wore a suit of sharp, dark wool, and my hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant knot. I stopped 10 feet from the stage. The silence was so deep, I could hear the hum of the projector. Evan looked down at me, terrified, confused, stripped of all his arrogance. He looked at the screen, then back at me, the realization crashing down on him like a tidal wave. I looked him in the eye, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. "Son," I said, my voice clear and projecting without a microphone. "I bought what you owe to teach you the final lesson." Evan scrambled down the steps of the stage, nearly tripping over his own feet. He rushed toward me, his hands reaching out, but he stopped short when he saw the look in my eyes. It was not the look of a mother who was about to bake him a pie. It was the look of a banker foreclosing on a bad investment. "Mom, please." Evan gasped, sweat dripping down his face. "You bought the debt. That means we are okay. Right. You did this to save me. I knew it. I knew you would not let me drown." I stood perfectly still. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. Every guest was leaning in, desperate to hear the verdict. "Save you?" I asked, my voice calm and carrying across the room without effort. "Evan, I did not buy your debt to erase it. I bought it to collect it." What Evan whispered, stepping back as if I had slapped him. "But I am your son? And because you are my son, I kept a ledger," I said, pulling a folded paper from my pocket. "You lost $600,000 on a restaurant that never existed. You took out 2 mortgages on a home your father paid for in cash. You spent $120,000 on luxury trips while asking me for grocery money. You have lived like a king on a beggar's budget. And tonight, the bill is due." Evan looked around wildly, seeking an ally. He turned to Kendra, but she was already inching toward the exit, clutching her purse. "But the trust fund?" Evan stammered, his eyes wide with panic. "I have the trust I can pay you back once the quarterly dividends hit next week. Just give me an extension. Until then," I shook my head slowly. "There is no trust fund. Evan, not anymore." "What? What are you talking about?" "Clause 4B, I said, reciting the words that had been written 20 years ago. Any beneficiary who publicly humiliates, abuses, or exhibits gross negligence toward the grantor shall forfeit all rights to the inheritance. The video of you and that cardboard box has 3 million views. Evan, you signed your own resignation from this family's wealth. A gasp went through the crowd. Evan's knees buckled, and he grabbed the edge of a table to stay upright. He looked at Kendra, his last hope. Kendra. He pleaded. Babe, we can fix this. We still have your portfolio, the investors you know. I turned my gaze to Kendra. She froze. Kendra does not have a portfolio. Evan, I said, looking at the woman who had called me a burden. She has a Ponzi scheme. My auditors found the records this morning. She has been taking deposits from new investors to pay off the old ones. It is a Class B felony. Kendra's face went white. She tried to run, but 2 large security guards I had hired stepped in front of the doors. That is a lie. Kendra shrieked, her voice shrill and ugly. You are a crazy old bat. No one believes you. The police are waiting in the lobby. Miss Morell, I said calmly. They have the warrant. As the guards escorted a screaming Kendra out of the ballroom, the reality of Evan's situation crashed down on him. He had lost his money. He had lost his future. He had lost the woman he betrayed his mother for. He stood alone in the center of the room, stripped of everything. The guests looked at me. There was no mockery in their eyes now. There was fear. There was respect. They realized that the woman in the old coat was the most powerful person in the room. I walked closer to Evan. I did not yell. I did not curse. I simply stood there, a witness to his destruction. I told you I was useless. I said softly. I told you I had nothing. And because you believed that, you treated me like dirt. You did not love me. Evan, you tolerated me because you thought I was harmless. You were wrong. Evan looked at me, tears streaming down his face. He sank to his knees on the plush carpet, sobbing openly in front of the people he had tried so hard to impress. Mom, I am sorry. He choked out. His head bowed. I am so sorry. I have nothing. I have nowhere to go. Please, do not leave me like this. It would have been easy to kick him. It would have been easy to walk away and let him rot. But I was not just a creditor. I was a mother who had to break her child's legs so they could heal straight. I am offering you one deal, I said, looking down at his shaking shoulders. One chance. Not as a millionaire, not as my heir, but as a man. Evan looked up, his eyes red and swollen. Anything. I will do anything. I own your debt, I said, my voice hard as iron, and I intend to work it off. You have a choice. You can walk out that door and figure it out on your own, with $0 and a ruined reputation. Or you can accept my rehabilitation plan. It will be hard. It will be humiliating. And it will take years. But it is the only way you get back to being a human being. Evan looked at the door, then back at me. He saw the steel in my spine. He realized for the first time that I was the only person in the world who would not lie to him. I accept, he whispered, lowering his head again. Please, help me. The morning after the gala, the headlines were vicious. The press called it the fall of the House of Harlow. But they were wrong. It was a renovation. I had stripped the house down to the studs. And now, my son had to rebuild it brick by brick. Evan signed the rehabilitation agreement in my lawyer's office with a shaking hand. It was a document of surrender. He agreed to work 40 hours a week in community sanitation, a job I had arranged through my contacts at the city council as a condition for holding off the debt collectors. He would live in a studio apartment the size of his old walk-in closet. He would take the bus. He would learn what $1 actually bought when you had to sweat for it. Kendra did not last a week. As soon as the forensic accountants started peeling back the layers of her investment scheme, she tried to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. She was arrested at the gate. I heard she was facing 10 years for fraud. Evan did not visit her. I think he finally realized that she loved the lifestyle he provided, not the man who provided it. For the first month, I did not see him. I let him sit in the silence of his new life. Luther kept me updated, sliding reports across my desk like a spy handler. He is struggling. Meredith. Luther told me one rainy Tuesday, hesitating as he poured tea. He missed a shift last week because his alarm did not go off. The foreman docked his pay. He called me. He wanted to know if he could borrow $50 for groceries. "What did you tell him?" I asked, staring out at the grey sky. I told him that the Bank of Meredith Harlow is closed. Luther replied softly. He cried. I nodded, though my heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. Good. Tears water the soul. Luther. He has been dry for too long. The town began to change its tune. The people who had laughed at me, the ones who had whispered that I was a senile old woman, now nodded respectfully when I walked into the grocery store. They saw a woman who had the strength to do the hardest thing a mother can do. I was no longer the victim. I was the matriarch who refused to let her son rot in a gilded cage. 2 months later, I decided I needed to see him. I did not want to speak to him. I just needed to know that he was still standing. I drove my old sedan down toward the industrial district. It was a grim part of town, full of warehouses and exhaust fumes. I saw the crew working on the side of the highway, wearing bright orange safety vests. They were clearing debris from a storm drain. And there he was. Evan looked different. He had lost weight. The softness in his face, that puffy look of indulgence, was gone. His skin was tanned from the sun, and his hands, which used to be manicured, were gripping a heavy shovel. He was covered in mud. He looked exhausted. But as I watched, I saw him stop to help an older man lift a heavy bag of trash into the truck. He did not complain. He did not look around for applause. He just did the work. I felt a lump rise in my throat. For the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of my husband in him. I drove slowly past the bus stop where the crew was waiting to go home. Evan was sitting on the bench, staring at his boots. He looked up as my car approached. Our eyes locked through the glass. For a second, I thought he would run to the car. I thought he would bang on the window and beg me to take him home to his silk sheets and heated floors. But he stayed seated. His face flushed a deep red. He looked at his dirty uniform, then back at me. There was shame in his eyes. Yes. But there was something else too. Recognition. He nodded to me. It was a small, jerky movement, barely a twitch of his chin. I am trying. Mum. His lips seemed to shape the words, though I could not hear them through the glass. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to stop the car. I wanted to unlock the door. I wanted to buy him a hot meal. I wanted to be his mother. But I knew that if I stopped now, the journey would end. He was climbing a mountain, and he was only halfway up. If I carried him the rest of the way, he would never know if he could reach the summit on his own. Keep walking. Evan. I whispered to the empty car. Just Keep walking. I pressed the gas pedal and drove past him. I did not look back in the rear-view mirror. I could not bear to see him watching me leave. But as I turned the corner, I felt a strange lightness in my chest. He was suffering, but he was alive. He was poor, but he was becoming real. The empire I had built was safe, and for the first time in a long time, I believed that my son might actually be worthy of inheriting it one day, not because of his last name, but because of the callus on his hands. My life was starting over too. I was no longer waiting for him to grow up. I was living, and he would have to run to catch up. It has been 6 months since that terrible night in the ballroom, and the seasons in Colorado have turned from the biting frost of winter to the golden warmth of early autumn. Today, I stood on a different stage. There were no champagne towers or hollow laughter here. Instead, there were rows of folding chairs set up on the lawn of the old estate I had purchased with the dividends from Greylight Holdings. The banner above me rippled in the wind. It read, "The Richard Harlow Foundation for Forgotten Mothers." I looked out at the sea of faces. There were women in their 60s and 70s, women with worn hands and tired eyes, women who had been told by society and sometimes by their own children that their time was over. I adjusted the microphone, my hands steady and strong. "We are told that we are burdens," I said, my voice ringing clear across the garden. "We are told that because our hair is grey, our value is gone. But I am here to tell you that a woman who has raised a child, who has weathered the storms of life, is not useless. She is a library of survival. And today, we take our dignity back." The applause was not polite. It was thunderous. It came from a place of deep, shared pain and newfound hope. I had become something of a symbol here in Denver. The story of the widow who bought her son's debt had circulated, not as gossip, but as a parable of strength. As the crowd began to mingle after the speech, enjoying the tea and sandwiches, I saw him. Evan was standing at the very edge of the property, under the shade of a large oak tree. He was not wearing a tuxedo. He wore a clean, simple button-down shirt and work boots that were scuffed at the toes. He looked thinner, his face sharper, but the frantic, desperate look he used to wear was gone. He held a paper cup of water, watching me. He did not try to come closer. He did not try to leverage his connection to the woman everyone was celebrating. He just stood there, listening. Our eyes met across the 100 yards of grass. In the past, I would have rushed to him. I would have asked if he was eating enough, if his apartment was warm, if he needed a few dollars. But I stayed where I was. I realized now that rushing to save him had never been love. It had been fear. I had been afraid that he could not handle the world. So I softened it for him until he became soft himself. Now, looking at him, I saw something new. I saw respect. He raised his paper cup slightly in a silent toast. His lips moved, and though I could not hear him, I knew the words. "Good job, Mom," he seemed to say. I nodded back, a slow, deliberate acknowledgement. I did not smile, but my eyes softened. He drank the water, crushed the cup, and placed it in a recycling bin before turning to walk back toward the bus stop. He had a shift tonight. He had a life to build. And for the first time, I trusted him to build it. I did not follow him. Later that evening, as the sun began to dip behind the Rocky Mountains, painting the sky in violent streaks of purple and orange, I stood on the rooftop terrace of the foundation building. Luther stood beside me, silent as always. He looked well, Luther said, breaking the quiet. He looked real. I corrected. He is not the son I dreamed of. Luther. He is not the titan of industry his father was. But he is finally becoming a decent man, and that is worth more than $5 million. I leaned against the railing, feeling the cool air on my face. The journey had been brutal. It had broken my heart to break his ego. But looking at the city lights flickering on below, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had reclaimed my name. I had reclaimed my company. But most importantly, I had reclaimed myself. I was no longer the ghost in the background. I was the author of the story. "Do you think he will come back one day?" Luther asked. "Maybe," I said, watching the first star appear. "But if he does, he will walk through the front door as a guest, not a beggar." Love is not about removing the mountains in front of your children, Luther. It is about giving them the boots to climb them. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the crisp air of freedom. The useless mother was gone. The woman who stood on this roof was invincible. When a mother stands up, her whole life stands up with her, and no one can push her down again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Meredith's journey. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Grandma's Family Diary, smash that like button, and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more people.